I'm back. I'm back. I went to what I'm calling Cult Fest 2024, also known as the RNC in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That was a sight to behold. But with all that said, President Joe Biden has decided not to pursue a second term for 2024. Without a primary, without an open process, Vice President Kamala Harris has quickly become the Democrats' presumptive nominee. Is this democracy or a Bernie Sanders redo? Stay tuned. We're going to answer those questions.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon. I'm Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they occur in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that impact the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is the 2024 presidential election and how the Democrats are selecting their nominee. My guest is Tom Porter. He's a lifelong activist and scholar, former dean of the African American Studies Department at Ohio University, former director of the King Center in Atlanta, former host of Morning Conversations with Tom Porter. Tom Porter, welcome back to the podcast, my brother. So, Tom, as I said in the open, President Joe Biden has decided not to pursue a second term for 2024. Without a primary, without an open process, Vice President Kamala Harris has quickly become the Democrats' presumptive nominee. I believe she has now amassed the requisite delegates in order to become officially the nominee. On July 8th, Clinton advisor James Carville, who is one tricky somebody, wrote a piece entitled, "Biden Won't Win. Democrats Need a Plan. Here's One," wherein he wrote, "The jig is up, and the sooner Mr. Biden and Democratic leaders accept this, the better. We need to move forward, but it can't be by anointing Vice President Kamala Harris or anyone else as the presumptive Democratic nominee. We've got to do it in the open, the exact opposite of what Donald Trump wants us to do." Tom, it doesn't appear, at least at this point, that the Dems are listening to Carville.
And they shouldn't.
Okay.
And they shouldn't. I remember the most important black labor leader in the country came out of a meeting with Clinton, Carville, and Al Frum, and he said to me, he said, "Tom, they're a bunch of fascists. It is the Clinton wing that took over the Democratic Party under the leadership of the Democratic Leadership Conference, which is made of Southern governors, which has gotten the Democratic Party in trouble ever since." And what that means is that Carville didn't want Kamala Harris. That's what that means. It had nothing to do with the open process and what have you. He wouldn't know open if he had a can opener.
But to his point about an open process, because further on in that piece, he talks about Clinton and Obama selecting, I think it was 8 potential nominees, and that they needed to have regional town halls where these individuals would travel the country, explaining their policies, introducing themselves to the electorate, and then based upon that, an individual would be, I think the term was, selected. Tom.
Well, the fact of it is, one of the things that Jesse Jackson and the Jackson campaign of 1984 is instructive, and people should study that more. Mm-hmm. What Jesse found out, that even though he was leading the other presidential candidates, that the rules of the Democratic Party were stacked against him. It was called front loading. So for Carville, they throw the word around democracy. First of all, America's never been a democracy. It was born in slavery, genocide of Native Americans, and stealing the land from the Mexicans. So the fact of it is, it only had the possibility of becoming a democracy, and it is yet to come there. So what Carville is talking about, it seems very, very interesting, but it's he who controls the process controls the day. And I'll guarantee you that Clinton and Carville and that bunch are not going to have any kind of process that they don't control. And so it may look like it. I mean, it looks like Biden was chosen. He was number 4. How did he get past 3 candidates and become number 1? It wasn't an open process. And I tell you one thing, Carville and nobody else said anything because he was their choice, because they wanted to stop Bernie Sanders.
There are those who say that Joe Biden was selected not to defeat Donald Trump. Joe Biden was selected to defeat Bernie Sanders.
And you're absolutely right. And that is what they have done. They did it with Jesse in '84. The whole Jaime thing was just that, a hoax. Jesse never said it in any kind of way that was demeaning towards the Jews. But the JDL interrupted Jesse's announcement when he announced that he was going to run for president, and hounded us being me, Florence Tate, and Jesse, who are 3 people called a road team when Jesse first started running in '84. They hounded us, the JDL, every place we went. And before we got Secret Service protection, it was Farrakhan and the FOI that protected us. So they were after Jesse from the beginning. It's instructive for people to read the platform of the Rainbow Coalition, because Jesse has had the most progressive populist campaign in the 20th century.
I'm glad you brought that up. This takes us a bit off topic, but I think it is relevant, because James Clyburn and a group of African-American leadership went in and met with Biden a couple of weeks ago. And that's when Clyburn came out with the line, "We riding with Biden." And one of the things that I said as a result of that was, what did you get for that endorsement? When you walked into the room and you sat down with Joe Biden, did you put your own 2020 Project 2025 plan on the table and say, look, Joe, here's what we need, here's what we want, here's what we demand. You're going to sign this, or we're going to go back out here and tell people that you just fell asleep in the meeting. I don't know what they got for that. And based upon the way that this whole thing has gone, it seems as though they were once again on the wrong side of history. So for you to say that people need to go back and read the plan from the Jackson campaign, that, and then we can even go back to the Black Political, the Gary Conference.
Gary Convention.
That there's enough data. Go ahead.
Those are 2 documents that people need to read, not only read, but they need to update them. That is the agenda that came out of the Gary Convention and Jesse Jackson's platform. Mm-hmm. It was the most, not only was Jesse's platform the most advanced, in 1984, when I left the university, I was looking for something to do, so I decided to run for Congress. And Jackie Jackson called me, Jesse's wife, and said, Jesse wants to meet with you. And I was in Cincinnati running for Congress. And I went to Chicago, spent the night at Jesse's house the day before Thanksgiving in 1983. And that's when Jesse asked me if I would work with him in the campaign. But I ran for Congress in Ohio, and I ran in 2 counties that were 99% white. And blacks and white in Cincinnati, which was a big city, said, don't go out there, show your literature, but don't show your face. Long story short, Mondale was at the top of the ticket. I got 2,000 more votes than he did in Brown County, and 1,000 more than he did in Claremont County. He was at the top of the stick. He was supposed to help me. The fact of it is, it was Jesse's populism that got basically these working class, mostly Republican whites, to get behind Jesse because of his platform. It was a very populist platform to the left. Trump came along with a populist platform from the right. From the right. And so the Democratic Party, instead of embracing Jesse's platform, which came out of the Gary Convention. Instead of embracing it, they moved the leadership of the Democratic Party to the Democratic Leadership Conference and hired all of Jesse's people and gave them jobs, which are meaningless jobs because they'd moved the structure from the party someplace else. But these Negroes became deputy this, deputy that. I got calling names, but I don't want to. Some of them I still call friends. But they drank the Kool-Aid. And if you read some of the press around Clinton and his crew, Al Fromm and James Carville, one theme was, we don't need Jesse Jackson anymore. They marginalized Jesse so much so that in the convention in New York, Jesse didn't have a VIP pass. He had to come through the door like everybody else. That's Clinton and his crew and Nancy Pelosi and Clyburn and all of the Negroes come out of that. Obama's position was to negate the progress and the Black leadership that had gone before. He calling Dr. King a simple country preacher. He couldn't carry Dr. King's dirty underwear.
Well, in fact, wait a minute. To that, first of all, is that negating the negation? Is the one question. And to your point, you can go and read President Obama's acceptance speech at the Nobel, where he talks about Dr. King and then says, "But I'm an American president. I have a different set of concerns that I must address." You don't quote Dr. King and then say, "Yeah, but." You say, "Yeah, yeah."
But his job was to negate the advances that had been made. And our responsibility, and this is what this generation of young people, when Joe Biden has to pass the torch, but not pass the torch to Hakeem Jeffries and that crew, we have to negate them, which is called a negation of the negation, which is an affirmation of something at a higher level.
Because two negatives make a positive.
That's right. That's right. And so getting back to where we are now, of course, Kamala Harris was not chosen as a result of some democratic process. And one would not expect that coming from the Nancy Pelosi, Bill Clinton, and them. And so the responsibility of this generation of young people, and young people have actually shown from the mass worldwide protests around the George Floyd lynching, Greta Thunberg, and climate change, the mass protests around the war in Gaza, the mass women protests around the world. There's a new populism that is emerging. And if Kamala Harris does not pick somebody to be the vice president to the left of her, she may have problems.
Now, when you say to the left of her, that's a very, very interesting designation, because there are many who will say she is the left that she was the left to Biden. And by the way, folks, Tom mentioned the Democratic Leadership Council. Joe Biden was an instrumental part of that as well. Bill Clinton, Al Gore, Joe Biden, they were all, Nancy Pelosi, they were all instrumental parts of moving the Democratic Party from the left. They want to say center, but it was actually to the right. So, Tom, what do you say to those that say, "Oh, wait a minute, Mr. Porter, Vice President Harris is to the left of Joe Biden"?
It wouldn't be difficult. I mean, that's a distinction without a difference. They say,
right?
You know, twiddly dee and twiddly dum. You know, she was as a black person. As a black person, she would have to be, given the history that she is a part of, be the left of most white candidates. But at the same time, she was not on the left. So for her to pick, conventional wisdom is a bunch of BS. First of all, as somebody's always been telling me, well, Tom, conventional wisdom or you don't understand real politics. I tell you where you can go with both of those. So conventional wisdom says that she should pick somebody from a state that she needs, a governor. The protests and the mass movements that are happening, the populist movements that are happening, are to the left. And they're to the left because the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are so far to the right. But it used to be when we said left, we meant socialist or communism. But the left today is anything left of the Democrat or Republican parties. But if she is the two things that I think that are important now, one is the platform. One is the platform. I mean, she's going to be the vice president, the president nominee. That's a foregone conclusion, because any of these other people who want to jump up, they can't go anywhere. What's this guy out of West Virginia said that he was thinking about running?
Right.
The base of the Democrat. Yeah, the base of the Democratic Party is Black and growing Hispanic. And he's not going to get any votes from them. And so for him to say that he might run, and they know it, and that's why they use Clyburn in 2020, who, just as he said, we riding with Biden, we know Joe, and Joe know us. I mean, some of that old coon foolishness, So they know they can't move without Black folks. But at the same time, they're hoping that they got other Clyburns.
And they know they can't move without Black folks, but they never offer substantive legislation to demonstrate a commitment, because for as much as they know they can't move without us, they don't want to appear to the broader demographic that they're with us.
Well, the fact of it is, if they were true and honest, Jesse Jackson would have become leader of the Democratic Party, just like Trump did. Obama could have become the leader of the Democratic Party, but that wasn't his job. His job was to look good, he and his wife, while doing nothing. My daughter sent me a magazine cover the other day where Obama was on there, and it was something about the new generation of cool. He was supposed to be the replacement for Miles Davis and Malcolm X, all of the Black people who we consider to be cool, just because they taught him how to dress and walk black and he could shoot a basketball. So he did not want to be head of the Democratic Party. He liked his job. He had barbecues and, all kind of Black folks in the White House, and they line danced and did what they did. And then he came out and did nothing. So the key thing now for the Democrats, if they want to win, I wasn't going to vote for Joe Biden anyway, and I already said it. And anybody that co-signs what he did in Gaza, he could be running against the devil, and I wouldn't vote for him or the devil. So I wasn't going to vote for him. I'm, Kamala Harris. Black people going on to glory. They went on to glory with Jesse Jackson. They went on to glory with Barack Obama, because Black people feel their latent nationalism that when we get somebody Black, we'll get a better deal if we get somebody white. But as they say, you might be my race, but you're not always my taste. So, but they're excited about Kamala Harris. They're all this money, and Black women on Facebook are putting them with Kamala.
Right.
I don't have a problem with that. The problem is what's going to be the platform, and is she going to choose somebody to the left of her, a more populist candidate? Because if she's not going to do that, then what are we talking about? More of the same. And the other thing that the Democratic Party has to do in the new world that we live in, they've got to loosen the grips that the Israeli lobby has on the party.
What about, I want to quickly go back to the issue with the African-American women and this proclamation or this statement, this sentiment that that Vice President Harris has earned the right to be the vice president, and that any attempt to either have a more open process or anything that might challenge that is a threat to Black women. It's a threat to Black womanhood. Your thoughts on these politics, this whole identity politics thing, because she's a Black woman, now all of a sudden it's hands off.
Yeah, I understand that sentiment, but I understand it. It's like with Obama. We questioned Obama, but the Black women said that Michelle would keep him in line. Remember that?
Oh yeah,
they said
because Michelle was we're from Chicago, and when she said that, I said, "Oh, we got some straight gangsters up in this joint. We got some El Rukins."
But it was also because she was darker,
than
Obama, and even Obama himself said he was a mutt, a mongrel.
Right.
You know, he was sure about one thing, and he really wasn't Black. He was clear about that. So I understand the sentiment, but like everything else in our politics, we've got to be serious about
not sentimental.
Not sentimental. That's what Dr. King said in his great thing about power. He said, he said, love without power. He said, power without love is reckless, but love without power is weak, sentimental, and anemic. And so I understand that, you know, everybody wants to see somebody. I'd like to see short guys run the world. You know, I'm 5'6". No, but it's deeper than that.
No, Tom, it's taller than that.
You're absolutely right. So I understand the sentiment, but that's the reason why I tell people that you must study deeper. You can't be all form and no content, because then you end up saying that Michelle is darker than Obama and therefore she'll keep him in line. They were both like Clinton and Hillary, which was their role model, you know, latter day Bonnie and Clydes. You know, so I understand that sentiment, but unless they turn it into something, unless they talk about the platform, what is the platform going to look like? What is Kamala going to run on? I mean, I see her quietly distancing herself from Netanyahu's visit. She's going to be in Indiana, but then she's going to secretly meet with him. It's not so much a secret. So we've got to be, these are very, very serious times. And as they say in my neighborhood in Ohio, now's not the time to be nut rolling. so these are very, very serious times. And so when we look at passing the torch, who are we passing the torch to? Not Hakeem Jeffries, not the rest of these niggas, Roland Martin. They're all getting in line. They're getting in line without even discussing the platform.
Well, and well, first of all, could Kamala Harris get away with not meeting with Netanyahu, understanding the power of AIPAC, not meet with Netanyahu, and still win the election?
I think she could.
Okay.
I don't think, see, AIPAC has never been challenged. I mean, and AIPAC represents that group in the Jewish community who attempts to control everything that they can, particularly in the Black community, whether you're talking about the music, the culture, or what have you. We've got to say it. We got to say it. Because if we don't say it, then we allow ourselves to be chumped. And the fact of it is that it's got to be challenged. And she won't. Right. But she can challenge it by who she picks and what the platform's going to be in. AIPAC's power is basically through the media, and its money. It's not the numbers that they have that can put a candidate in office, except maybe in New York City. You know, but she won't. But that has to happen. We cannot allow a group of people to control significant aspects of our community and not say something about it.
Wait a minute. And to that point, to those that listening to this conversation want to jump on the anti-Semitism train and accuse us of being anti-Semitic, AIPAC said, and you can go back and look it up in the newspaper, they were going to invest $100 million into the Democratic primary process to be sure that they would unseat or prevent from winning candidates whose politics were to the left and that they deemed to be anti-Israel. That's not us making this up. That's them making the declaration. All we're doing is highlighting and calling your attention to what they said. So this, we're not making this up.
You know, I let those kinds of conversations roll off my back, you know, that you anti-Semitic, the same way when somebody says, if we get in a disagreement, the first thing they go to is, you got a Napoleonic complex. And my answer to that, would I be wrong if I was tall? You know, so you can't be afraid of all these things because they're gonna come at you anyhow.
Right.
I said to Jesse when the Jaime thing came up, I said, man, just don't cop to that. And some of the people who were around him told him to cop to that. It was the biggest mistake that he ever made, you know, because they never heard him said it, and he never said it in a derogatory way about. On the other hand, in our first meeting in New York, Percy Sutton met us before we were supposed to meet with the Jewish leaders of New York with a yarmulke on his head, telling us how we had to talk and act in front of the Jews in New York. So, look, I don't pay any attention to that. We have to challenge. We have to cash all checks when it comes to us, because it has to be a Pan-African perspective where we really, where the continent and blacks in the New World, we've got to challenge those things that oppress us, because if not, in this serious time, Trump them are going for all of the marbles.
Yes, they are.
I mean, they're going for all of the marbles, and there's enough Democrats, white Democrats, who will side with that stuff, because quite frankly, where we are right now, in order to solve the world's problems, we have to understand two things. Who's been in charge of the world for the last 400 years? White men. Look at the state of the world. They forfeited the right to run the world. But you're not going to give up just because you enslaved a bunch of people, stole the land from the Native Americans. You know, yeah, if we give up, we'd have to give up what we got. It's too bad, but we're not giving that up. And that's what Trump them, that's what Hitler was riding on. That's what Trump them are riding on. We don't want to give, if democracy is what it means to pay reparations, give some of the land back to the neighborhood. The hell with democracy. That's what they're saying.
I want to quickly go back to your point about challenging AIPAC and other type of organizations. And I want to tie it to what's going on in Gaza, because we're now 9 months into that conflict, and the Zionist government of Israel has been taking an ass whooping for 9 months straight. And so this whole mythology of the invincibility of the IDF, that they're this phenomenal military force, and you know, they're getting their ass whooped. And so the whole mythology behind this thing is being exposed. And so just as it's being exposed there, it's being exposed here. The question is, are we willing to do what we have to do to challenge that mythology in alliance with those that are fighting it in Gaza? Does that make sense?
Sure, it makes sense. Well, the fact of it is, given the geopolitical alignment in the world today with China and Russia and Brazil and different formations coming together, even the EU, who has been lockstep with Israel, the EU, it can no longer hold to that position, because without Africa, Europe is broke in terms of the resources. And so Israel, where it appears to be winning because of the devastation that it is reaping on the Palestinian people. There will be a reckoning, and it's coming slow, but it is coming. Even among the evangelicals who say that the rapture will come when Israel is safe and secure within its borders, and then Israel will be destroyed. So
I mean, look at what Yemen has been able to extract, or the force that they've been able to exact upon in terms of their involvement in this process. Yemen is considered to be the poorest country in the world. They control the Red Sea. They're sending missiles 1,200, 1,400 miles across Saudi Arabia and decimating important ports that Israel controls. The whole dynamic is shifting. So with that, when you look, you've talked about the platform. I remember when the platform committee meetings used to be broadcast on television, and I used to sit and listen to them. I know I need to get a life, but I used to sit and listen to them. That's not happening anymore. So how does a candidate Harris, what type of platform does she articulate, having sat there for years while the Biden administration is involved in genocide, while the Biden administration has wasted trillions of dollars in Ukraine? How does she formulate a platform that takes us away from that failed attempt at world domination and moves us closer to the direction that the world is actually going, as in BRICS and the South and the Chinese?
If we look at the Middle East,
the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, right, is what I was trying to get to.
If we look at the Middle East,
is that a reasonable question to ask?
And not only is it a reasonable question to ask, but it's a reasonable question to expect that it be answered. You can't allow a small country in the Middle East, which was settled by people who were not from that, had no connection to the original inhabitants of the Middle East, to control the future of the Western world. You know, there's a movie called Rollover, and this is when the Arabs dominated the money thing through oil. It started Chris Christopherson and James Fonda, and the Greenspan character, played by Hume Cronin. At one point, the Arabs were not going to roll over the money. And Hume Cronin said, "You're playing with the end of the world." That's where we're at. You can't allow a group of people since Jesus' time to control your system in the way that these people do, because it won't work with people talking about if they leave the dollar,
which they are doing,
somebody else loses their influence, because there's nothing backing the dollar to begin with. Talking about
other than more dollars.
Yeah, talking about only a paper moon.
But and Tom, people really need to understand, because it's not really being articulated here in the Western media. Again, the power of the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now about 7 or 8 other countries have joined the organization, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Those two, you know, as quiet as it's kept in the West, man, they kicked the French out of Niger. You look at the development of the Sahel Cooperation Organization. Man, they are kicking ass and taking names. They are finally moving beyond flag independence, and they are now actually taking control of their economies, and they are taking control of their countries, and they are kicking the West out.
The Palestinian leadership met for 2 days in Beijing. I mean, the world.
Right.
Remember, one of the most popular soap operas used to be As the World Turns.
In Daly City.
The world is turning.
Right.
And quite frankly, it's turning away, not so much from the West, but from the ways of the West. I mean, and they don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get it. You can't put sanctions on the whole world without putting sanctions on yourself. You can't tell people they can't come to America and you be welcome in Panama and Costa Rica and Brazil. It doesn't work like that. Or you be welcome in Africa. It doesn't really work like that. You telling people they can't come. Well, clues, the borders work both ways. We can open them and close them, and you can't. I mean, the policies are so stupid in the West. I mean, it's almost, particularly in the United States, because they have sold this white nationalism for so long, they'd actually believe it themselves. The world is going on without them.
And to that point, I'm looking up here seeing if I can put my hands on it, but I can't quickly. Dr. Ron Walters wrote a book a while ago, White Nationalism, Black Interests.
Right.
And I strongly suggest that people get a hold of it. To your point about the policy and the borders, which they say that the Biden administration put Kamala Harris in charge of the borders. I was at the RNC, and this woman was talking. This woman, Latinos for Trump, is who I was talking to, and she was talking about the border. The Democrats have just allowed. I said, wait a minute. You're not even talking about the American foreign policy in these countries that is decimating their economies and forcing these people to leave their countries to come here. And she looked at me very puzzled and quizzical, and I said, let me give you an example. Chiquita Banana last week was convicted in federal court in Florida of having sponsored death squads in Guatemala. So Chiquita Banana, a U.S. corporation, is killing Guatemalans, torturing Guatemalans, and they don't, that isn't motivation for them to leave their countries. She didn't even want to touch that. Didn't want to touch it.
Of course. I mean, it's very interesting that Trump would say that the people who come in across the border are taking jobs from blacks and Latinos. Who does he think are coming across the border?
People. Oh, I asked her about Haitians. I said, the United States, thank you, Hakeem Jeffries. Thank you, Kamala Harris. Thank you, Linda Thomas Greenfield. The United States is trying to reinvade Haiti. Where are the Haitians supposed to go?
I mean, the fact of it is, we have got to make sure and say to anybody that says that they represent us, Hakeem Jeffries, John Clyburn, Governor
Gregory Meeks,
that if you're going to represent us, this is the platform, brother. I mean, you had Hakeem Jeffries and Jonathan Jackson down here in Maryland supporting the guy that owns Total Wine and Liquors who was running for senator. Now, I don't know.
David Trone.
Yeah, and Alsabrook. I didn't have no dog in it, but how do you come down here in this neighborhood and you support a white candidate who is no more distinguished than Alsabrook? For what? Well, I know what Johnson Jackson did. He's in the same business. He's a liquor distributor. Mm-hmm. And my man owns Total Wine, but I understand that he paid off some of Hakeem Jeffries and John campaign debts. So I don't know, but that's not representing us. You're not representing us if you're not on the side of the Palestinians, if you don't believe in a two-state solution. You're not representing us if you don't understand what's happening in Africa or Haiti or Cuba. 70% of the people in Cuba are of African descent. So you're putting sanctions on your own people. You can't be co-signing that. And we got to say this. We got to negate the negation. As Margaret Walker said, let a new race of men and women rise and take control. That's what time it is.
So how do we get the presumptive right now Democratic nominee Kamala Harris as a woman of color, as a multi-ethnic woman, Jamaican and Indian, how do we get her to speak to those issues?
First of all, we got to energize the Black community, because they're counting on that. And we've got to say to Black women, these are the issues that we think, and there are Black women who agree with us. These are the issues that we think that are important to the Black community. Mm-hmm. And these are, you know, and we need to have town halls. We got to not only re-energize our Black community, but we need to re-energize a movement, because the struggle's not over. And we've got to put before, we can't just say that, Kamala, you Black, and therefore whatever you do is cool, because it's not cool.
But that's the narrative right now. We are so ecstatic, and I'm speaking in the global we are so ecstatic now that she is in this presumptive position, and they are saying that she has earned the right to be there simply because she's Black, because she's a woman, and because she's been the VP for 4 years. But when you go back to when she ran for the #1 slot, she was the first one out the race. She had 0 delegates. She got less than 5% of the vote. Black people didn't even vote for her.
Well,
and wait a minute, and final point, Tulsi Gabbard torched her ass in like 45 seconds. So, and folks, I ain't hating. I'm just putting out the data.
Well, I mean, she's earned the right as much as anybody else, but that's not really saying anything.
Okay.
That's not ever saying anything. The question is, now you're here, and this is what we're saying.
So what you gonna do?
Yeah, this is what we're saying. You know, we already went through Obama with his stuff. And see, we got to quit accepting this notion of the first Black to do this. The only reason why, I mean, you take the question of Black quarterbacks. The only reason why there were no Black quarterbacks in the NFL until there were some had absolutely nothing to do with it. There were Black quarterback in junior high, and Black high schools and colleges ever since there were some. And so the fact that you decide to let us in don't have anything to do with it, because we've earned the right. We've earned the right. Our ancestors paid the price for us to be any damn thing we want to be in this country. But now, if you're going to represent us, this is what we need at this point. And if you can't do that, it's okay. Do like Biden did. Go sit next to him while he's fishing. But we have got to have more programs like this. Too many people are nut rolling in the press. You know, you have people who, when I was in radio, well, you got to do both sides. There's no good side to slavery. I'm not even going to attempt that one. So,
well, in fact, Tom, I've always, particularly when I started talking about Palestine, and I'd get calls from Jewish listeners who would tell me that I'm not balanced. And I said, no, I'm not trying to be balanced. I'm the counterbalance, because anything that the positions that you want to articulate and the narrative that you want to hear, you get it in the Washington Post. You get it in the New York Times. You get it in the LA Times. You get it on MSNBC. You get it on CNN all day, every day. So I don't have to present that because it's already presented. I'm the counter to that. And I think I got that from you, by the way.
Well, you know, it's very, very interesting. I was watching the BBC yesterday, and the BBC host was saying, well, you know, Kamala Harris is Black and Asian, as if these would become factors, and she had an affair with Willie Brown. I mean, first of all, she's running against a cat who's damn near a serial rapist. So you know, but
and admitted as such.
But then nobody mentions that J.D. Vance's wife was Indian. Nobody talked about Nikki Haley being Indian. It only comes up when it's Black people.
Vivek Ramaswamy, who I talked to at the convention, and was an empty can, just full of talking points. Go ahead.
And so we're going to have to, the Black community is going to have to defend her, even even if she doesn't want us to defend her, because they're coming at her.
Oh, no question.
They're coming at her, and somebody's going to slip up and use the N-word. In fact,
when I was at the convention, I was on the floor right after they nominated J.D. Vance. And so, and that whole process ended the day session. I'm doing my stand-up with the convention floor in the background, and this other news entity had allowed us to use their stand-up space. And as I'm wrapping up, I say, you know, I find it interesting that a guy who just 3 years ago was telling America that Donald Trump was the next thing to Adolf Hitler is now going to be standing next to this Adolf Hitler as his VP. I said, how does that happen? And when I said that, the guy who allowed us to use his space came up and said, you guys got to go. you guys got to go. And we said, well, wait a minute. So anyway, but that, I raise all that to say that question I'm not hearing many people ask. J.D. Vance said that Donald Trump was the next thing to Hitler, and he's now standing next to his Hitler.
Well, I say this about J.D. Vance, and I put it on Facebook, that he is either the white version of the spook who sat by the door, or he is the opportunist of the highest order. And I think it's probably a combination
of the two.
Yes, yes. Yes, and I think Trump may be a little bit concerned now because Trump is in hot water because people don't like him. Now they tolerate him. You think Mitch McConnell likes Trump?
No. Oh, well, see, in fact, I'm glad you said that, because my advice to the Democrats right now is just put together a clip, a montage of J.D. Vance, of Lil Marco Rubio, of what's the dude from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, all of these folks who were, most of whom were sitting in Trump's box last week at Cult Fest 2024, which is also called the RNC convention. Put a montage of them, of Lindsey Graham saying he's a narcissist, he's a bigot, he's an idiot. All of those, put all that language, Cruz, all the folks that were in that box kissing his butt, they need to tell the truth.
And at the same time, the Democrats, they've got some work to do.
Oh,
I mean, where do you think all of those people who were supporting Bernie Sanders in 2020? It's one thing for Bernie Sanders to, you know,
right,
to be with the party, but those people, that's the reason why I said if she doesn't really pick a populist candidate as vice president running mate, or if the platform is not one that is of a populist nature, she's got serious problems.
Those former Bernie people are part of that new crew called the dual haters. They're part of that new crew that is saying, we don't want either of these buffoons talking about Biden.
And the fact of it is, a significant number of the American people didn't want either one of them either.
Correct.
It was the press and the polls, and I say the people that polls are designed to shape and mold public opinion, not to reflect the truth of public opinion. And of course, the other thing that we haven't looked at, who are these people in the press? How many of them are actually Republicans? I know Lester Holt is. Now, I'm not saying he's a Trump.
Right.
But I'm just simply saying, because the press has been very, very lax in covering Trump. I mean, he lies. They never say that he lied. We're going to fact check him. Why don't you just say he lied about this? He lied about that. That's the operative word. He lied.
In fact, I'm glad you brought up the polls, because that part of the conversation got away from me for a minute, because and I know that the whole issue with Kamala now has just surfaced. So current polling hasn't taken place yet and hasn't been analyzed. But when you go back to and looking at the numbers, you go to Real Clear Politics, Trump at 58.4, Kamala Harris at 32.9. Now, she has gained traction over the last couple of days, but still 58.4 to 32.9, that's not where you want to be with 4 months out from the election.
Yeah, but I think she has to ignore the polls. I remember again.
Oh, absolutely.
I remember again traveling with Jesse, and you know, Negroes always ask these questions. They don't ask these questions, and they say, well, let's face it, Jesse Jackson, you can't win, Reverend Jackson. You got no organization, all this kind of stuff. And at that time, it was 7 candidates in the race, and Jesse said, I'm number 3. At least 4 other candidates that like to have my place. And so I think she has to ignore the polls, because the polls are all part of the establishment, you know, and they got a dog in the hunt. And what's on the agenda now? What's on the agenda now is whether or not capitalism can, in fact, solve the pressing problems that are facing the world today. And I would say that it can't. And so then what is the solution? I mean, I'm not saying that I have a solution, but I can say what ain't the solution, because it hasn't worked. And therefore, we got to be trying something new with some new people. And so the changing of the guard and the passing of the baton includes the passing it away from white men, the same white men who've been running the world, and the same white women who've been aligned with them. The passing of the torch means that we got to not go with these Negro leaders who've been appointed, but to find our own leaders and to elect our own leaders. And the ones that don't do what we want them to do, we punish them by not electing them again.
Final question to you then. As you look at Kamala Harris as the presumptive nominee, I've been saying it can't work by just changing the messenger and not changing the message.
Oh, absolutely.
Go ahead, Tom Porter.
I mean, absolutely. We've already been there before. We've been there with Obama. Obama had, in the first term, he had the House and the Senate. He did nothing. And so we can't just change the message, the messenger, or be satisfied that the messenger looks like us. We can't. We have got to demand and insist that people who represent us, at whatever level they represent us, from the city council to the Congress and what have you, that if you're going to represent us, and if you're not, get the hell out the way.
But Tom, so what do you say to those AKAs that are ski-weeing and doing the electric slide behind Kamala Harris and saying, oh, no, you can't do that now. Oh, no, you can't say that now, because you can't put that on her now, because we have to get her elected. And if you play those cards now, you're going to put her in a very precarious position, and, you know, we'll lose the opportunity to have the first Black woman as a president. So what do you say to them that will respond in that manner?
We don't need a first Black woman president because she's Black. It's like people who say people fought and died for the right to vote. That's a lie. I fought and I didn't die for the right to vote, not for the right to vote, but the right to vote for something and somebody that would represent me. And so, as the old folks say, you might be my race, but you're not my taste unless you're willing to do what the ancestors have done. The legacy that you've inherited is not a legacy of people who went along to get along. It's a legacy of Fannie Lou Hamer. It's the legacy of Dr. King. It's the legacy of SNCC and CORE. That's the legacy. And if you ain't in that legacy, then get the hell out the way. Whether you AKA, I don't know nothing about Greek organizations, right, because I'm Gamma Delta Iota, damn independent. So, but my point of it is, we can no longer listen to these kind of arguments. You know, these arguments go slow. They say go slow. I mean,
yours will come by and by.
Yeah, but we are past that. The world is in a serious position. And last I looked, we're in the world, whether we're talking about the environment, whether we're talking about violence in the street, whether we're talking about homelessness, whether we're talking about climate, whatever we're talking about, Black people are impacted about that. And if you ain't for that, then get back. I mean, and we have to say that. I mean, I have no problem with saying to people, including in my own family, that look, if you ain't gonna do nothing, get the hell out the way. I mean, I say that to my daughters, my grandkids, my friends. If you ain't gonna do nothing, don't come around me, because that ain't my style. And my heroes were Dr. King and Malcolm X and Fannie Lou Hamer. They weren't AKAs or Deltas. We didn't care nothing about any of that. And some progressive people were part of those organizations. But we can't, if she can't get elected on a platform that's a progressive platform, then how's she going to govern as a progressive?
I want to thank my guest, brother, Tom Porter. Man, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's been a pleasure, brother.
Folks, thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon, and Tom Porter. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. Also, please follow and subscribe. Leave a review. Share the show. Follow me. Follow us on social media. You can find all the links to the show below in the description below. And remember, folks, this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge, because talk without analysis is just chatter. And we don't chatter here, unlike a whole lot of folks. We don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. I'm going to see you again next time. Until then, I'm Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a great one. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.